And we're back because Tim Josi has made it. So we're going to do Tillamook today with LeeAnn Neal and Commissioner Tim Josi. Good morning, LeeAnn.
Good morning. Yep, Tim just sat down, so we're all ready to roll here.
On the fly here. We're flying by the seat of our pants. All right.
All right, thanks so much. Yes, this is LeeAnn Neal, and I'm editor of the Tillamook County Pioneer, Tillamook County's online news source, and I'm here with Tillamook County Commissioner Tim Josi.
Well, good morning, and I apologize for being late.
No problem, Tim.
I had, so here's my excuse. There is none. Wasn't on my calendar.
Well, that's an excuse.
and why it wasn't, I don't know. I mean, this is generally, our calendar systems are very, very reliable.
Right.
And it's scheduled for the fourth Tuesday of every month. And here it was, and it wasn't there. And I checked, and it's on the past calendars and on the future events. But
let's just blame leap year. That'll work for me.
No vacation, no being out of town, no nothing. I have no idea why.
Well, that's all right. We'll put it behind us.
So I'm not prepared.
So you know what we could talk about, although it's kind of it's not great news, is the how the state of Oregon just recently got in trouble for. And again, you'll have to explain it because I don't. Now that I'm trying to say it, I don't even remember what it is exactly. but it has to do with pesticides and with a fine and with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What happened there?
Well, this is sort of an ongoing fight that the state of Oregon is having with the federal government, and it's not just pesticides, but it's riparian protections and that sort of thing. And so, let me back up a little bit. About 3 or 4 years ago, the Oregon Department of Forestry and Oregon State and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife got together, and they conducted they set up this test area, and it's called the Trask Period Watershed Study. And they went up there, and they said, all right, this is a perfect opportunity for us to do an analysis. They went up the Trask, and they found 4 canyons that came together and on the Trask. And one was owned by the BLM, one was owned by State Forestry, and the third one was owned by a private timber company. They were all ready to harvest. And so, and they're all, all basically lookalikes. Mm-hmm. So they went up there, and for about 3 years, they studied the streams and the morphology and all that stuff. So the stream temperature, stream sedimentation, how many benthic organisms, I like using that term because it's fancy, but it really means is just bugs.
Oh, okay.
And so, but that's really important because, if you're when you're a kid and you played around in streams and you turned over rocks and you found all these snails and stuff under the rocks, that's the food that fish feed on. And so it's really important. And so they counted those and the types and all that stuff. And then they also counted fish, not just baby salmon, but, the native fish that are up there, the trout and there, I forget the names of them, but there are different kinds of fish that live up there.
Sure.
And so they just took areas and they counted all that stuff. And they did that for about 2-3 years. And then they went up there and they all harvested at the same time, except for one. The one was a control, so they left it alone. And so, I don't know who owned that one, and it's not important because they left it alone. But
so 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4. And so, but the main thing is 3 different forest management strategies in terms of the riparian protection, leave trees, and all that stuff. And so it's basically U.S. Federal government forest management plan, state forest management plan, and then the management plan on the timber companies, which is the State Forest Practices Act. So they all harvested at the same time, and then they went back and they conducted a study of the effects, and it was very interesting. In all cases, fish numbers increased. In all cases, sedimentation stayed the same. Benthic organisms, I believe, either stayed the same or increased. And with stream temperature, it was the it was the private timber company under the Forest Practices Act where the temperature increased, but the others stayed the same. So let's go back to the private timber company with the forest under the Forest Practices Act. That temperature increased, but it only went up about a 1.5 degrees, roughly. My memory's not good on that, but it's less than 2. And then they studied, and it wasn't just the immediate area, but they checked downstream. By the time they got 300, it's either 300 feet or 300 yards below the where they harvested, that temperature went back to normal, also to what it was normally. And so the impacts were really minor.
Yeah.
The term they use is de minimis. And so that's a term I like to use because it's another fancy word.
It's Latin.
Is it?
I think so. Every time I hear an us, I assume that.
So anyway, they did that, but because the private timber company, their stream temperatures went up a bit, the federal government caught that right away. As far as I'm concerned, the federal government and their standards are pretty much out to lunch. So that's my point of view. So I'll put that on the table right away. But they did. The Board of Forestry spent several months looking at changing the Forest Practices Act, and they did change the Forest Practices Act, and they increased the riparian protection areas for private timber companies, and there was a big fight about that. Naturally, because the private timber companies were saying this is going to be a huge loss in terms of revenue to them. Mm-hmm. But they did it anyway. But the federal government, I think, was okay with what they did there. But they're not okay with the spraying of herbicides. Mm-hmm. And the state of Oregon and the Board of Forestry, they're saying that what we're doing is by the book. We're not hurting anybody or anything. There's ample notification. They use the least amount possible, and if the winds come up, they don't use it. And so they, at this point in time, they've elected not to change the rules on spraying herbicides.
That's within the Forest Practices Act? Or
within the Forest Practices Act.
Okay.
Now, interestingly enough, the reason why this whole issue came before us is because an environmental group sued the federal government and said, hey, state of Oregon needs to get off the dime and get something done and make some changes. And so finally, the federal government, I think is EPA, they said, yeah, we're going to have to do something. And they've been pushing the state to make some minor changes. The state hasn't done it. And so now it's going to cost a little in excess of like $1 million, $1.5 million a year. That this is money that's going to go to another state. So they're still in the middle of negotiations. I don't think that it is that big of a deal in the overall scheme of things. It's going to be interesting to see what the state of Oregon does.
Yeah. Let me take a quick break here to hear from one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back and talk about what the loss of that money actually will mean, if that's all right. We're going to hear about Clark's Plumbing. Do you know one of those do-it-yourself kind of guys? They're always telling you to do it yourself. Sometimes that isn't the best solution. You're in luck, whether it's a leaky faucet, a complete bathroom remodel, or maybe replacing that septic system. Do yourself a favor, call Clark's Plumbing. They're professionals. They'll get the job done. Anything, new installations, upgrades, the stopped-up drain, you name it, they can do it. So the next time you hear do it yourself, do yourself a favor and dial 842-5105 for Clark's Plumbing. That's 842-5105 for the professionals at Clark's Plumbing. And we're back with Commissioner Tim Josi talking about some issues between the state, the feds, and the Forest Practices Act. And so you said that the loss to Oregon will be roughly $1 million a year, something like that.
Yep.
What has that money been used for in the past?
Well, here's what I think it's been used for, and I could be wrong, but this is what I think. The Department of Forestry has several divisions. One of them is the State Forest Division, and that's where they get the lion's share of their revenues, is their share of the funds that come from timber receipts on state forest lands. But then they have the private forest division, Forest Practices Division, and they get those revenues from various funding sources from private timber companies when they have timber sales, and I think there's various taxations. I'm not good at this part of it because I've never had to be.
Right.
Well, when I was in the legislature, I did, but everything's changed since then. So it's going to have an impact on the state forest or the Forest Practices Act division, and so they're going to have to make up that money somewhere else.
Right.
They'll have to go to the general fund, or they're going to have to up some fees for the private timber companies. That's going to be a discussion that'll come up during the next legislative session.
Right. Have to move some money around somehow, like you said, or generate more. What about, and maybe I'm mixing this up with something else, but I thought I heard something or read something about the impact of that money, the lost money, affecting like watershed councils and things like that with some of the work that they do. Is that, or do you know if that's correct?
Boy, that's I think you might be right.
Yeah.
I think I remember reading that. That this is some of the do-good kind of stuff.
Right.
That would have an impact.
Yeah.
And so, which would be too bad because watershed councils do a lot of really good stuff.
Right. Yeah, they work with a lot of private landowners and different entities and whatnot. Yeah. So, yeah.
I had my fingers in that when watershed councils were created.
That's right.
There were 3 of us that worked on that.
That's right. That was back in the late 90s, wasn't it?
Oh, the Iron Age or the Stone Age or something like that. Long time ago. Yeah, it was back in the 90s. And it was Bill Bradbury, myself, and now I can't remember the state representative who chaired the Water Policy Committee. I was the vice chair. And so the 3 of us worked on that. We actually, 2 different sessions. The first session we got it passed, and then the second session we had to come back and make some modifications. But it's just, we had a vision.
Yeah.
And it just turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah.
In terms of what it's done. When you look at just the knowledge that it has imparted upon the communities up and down throughout Oregon about watersheds and the importance of them and how habitat is important and what kind of habitats you should have and stream temperature and all that sort of stuff. None of that stuff was obvious to people in Oregon at that time. And so it was a huge educational effort that I remember when we were looking at amending our riparian ordinance, which was a big blow up. And I remember
that.
Oh,
yes. I remember that too.
I remember people coming before us and saying, you leave us alone. We have a nice fish-bearing stream that runs through my property, and we have lawn that goes right down to the creek, and this is wonderful and lush, and how dare you come in and tell us to do something different? And the thing is they were doing just exactly the opposite of what that stream needs. If you take all the brush and the trees away from a stream, you allow sunlight in, and stream temperatures go up, and then the quality of that stream for bearing fish and growing the benthic organisms that I talked about, all that stuff is compromised. And so, man, I used to just cringe when I heard people say that, but they're so angry. I didn't want to correct them.
Well, right. I mean, it was definitely I think a lot of people were concerned it was a land grab. I mean, it was just a very. And they didn't know. They didn't know anything about, like you said, the actual the cause and effect of some of this stuff. I didn't know as a journalist. I mean, we learned, as everybody was learning, what these things, they were, putting root wads in the streams, and we were all scratching our heads and going, why are they doing that?
Yeah, I know.
And it took a while.
There was a landowners association that was created because of that, and there was, I remember when we had one big town hall meeting at the fairgrounds.
I remember that.
Not at the fairgrounds, and we had also one at the auditorium of the high school, and people were angry as hell at the 3 of us.
Yeah.
And then we lost a couple of commissioners because of that. The only reason why I didn't lose then is because I was in the midterm.
You weren't up for re-election at the time.
I remember that they had a candidates fair, and Sue and Gina were up there, and I was in the back watching this, and this guy just kind of strolled up to me, and he looked at me, and he says, "You're next, Josi."
When politics gets ugly.
Oh, that was one of the worst experiences in politics. I've had maybe 1 or 2. comparable to that. But
Yeah.
That was really, really very, very ugly.
I remember it very well. It was a real weird turning point, in some ways. Like you said, two of the commissioners were, that you would have thought would have probably been reelected normally, most likely weren't, and it just changed. It wasn't just about that, but
Yeah.
it really was an odd time. I do remember when the whole OWEB thing was happening, and you were our state rep, and Governor Kitzhaber led a press junket. We were all on a bus. They stuffed me and the radio people and the TV people and
Yeah.
some of the print people. We were all on a bus following you guys around in the woods on Highway 26.
Oh, yeah.
And just showing us, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And that's when I finally got it. It was actually being out there in the woods and seeing what you guys were talking about. It was pretty cool.
I remember that. Every time it's been a long time since I've seen John Kitzhaber, but every time he'd see me, he'd smile and he says, "You remember that trip? We were out there and we were on the Kiltus River and looking at a restoration project, and a seagull flew over and pooped on his head."
Oh, wow. Nobody around to take a photo, I guess.
No. He often thought about that. Every time he saw me, it reminded him of that experience he had with that seagull.
Well, at least it was good for a laugh, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let me get another sponsor in here real quick. This is from the Tillamook Farmers Co-op. Tillamook is farm country, and nobody serves this farming community better than the co-op. If it's time to get your 4-H or FFA animal ready for the fair, the co-op wants to help. FFA and 4-Hers get 10% off feed, grooming equipment, cages, anything they need to get their animal ready. The co-op has been offering quality products since 1936. They're there for your needs, from fencing to plumbing to electrical. Stop by for fuel and pick up everything you need. Tillamook Farmers Co-op is always there for you. And I am back with Tillamook County Commissioner Tim Josi, and I'm going to see what he wants to talk about now.
Okay, so I want to put a cap on our last discussion, and then I want to talk about Cape Kiwanda. We just had a meeting up there.
Yeah.
So I think so where are we with our riparian ordinance? Goal 5. There are 19 goals that the legislature created over time to protect the various resources that we have in Oregon, and so we're out of compliance with Goal 5 when it comes to riparian protection for our streams on county land. And it should be, I think, 70 feet, and we're at either 20 or 25 feet. And it never, ever did. It never got changed.
That was the issue back then, so it's still,
well,
oh dear.
So, and we were just wrapping up that whole issue when I got appointed. We weren't finished with it, but it was coming to a closure. But when I got appointed to the Land Conservation and Development Commission, this is the commission that oversees comprehensive plans for cities and counties. And I told those folks, I says, you're just going to have to let this one go because the people of Tillamook County are ready to rebel.
Yeah.
And so you just put this on the back burner, and they did, and they never have come back to it. And here's the real reason why. A lot of counties, I wouldn't say a lot, counties have been known to develop regulations and not abide by them.
Right.
And Tillamook County, we abide by our regulations. And when we say 25 feet, that 25 feet is protected. And so they recognize that. In reality, even though our regulations aren't up to standards, we're doing better than most counties.
Yeah.
So they just sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible.
Yeah.
And took a little, what I call a come to Jesus experience for them to come around. So anyway, let's talk about Cape Kiwanda.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, at the last board meeting, Board of Commissioners meeting, once a month we have meetings that are held in the surrounding areas, and instead of 10 o'clock in the morning, we'll have them at 6:30, and so it's north, central, and south. So we were going to have a meeting at Cape Kiwanda, and Chris Wayland, who's the fire chief in that area, he called me and let me know that there were going to be some people there at our meeting at the Kiwanda Community Center that were concerned about the number of deaths on the Cape. And he says, so I want you to be prepared, and so that you can speak to that issue. And so
that was good of him.
And so that was good of him. And so and he said he couldn't be there. He had another commitment. There were a couple of people that showed up. And so I took that issue on, and I says, look, let's go up there and take a look at this, and we'll invite some different folks and see what we can do to get a handle on this and see what can be done. And so that was last Thursday. Last Thursday, the weather was wonderful.
Yeah.
We couldn't have... Were you there?
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, I know you're talking about being there. But
my sister actually went up and was my photographer on the Cape, and then I zipped down and came to the meeting. So we were, yeah, definitely.
So that worked out really well. And so I choreographed that tour of the Cape itself, and got everybody together and then made some introductions, and then we went up there. And then I asked Andy Long to talk about the different hazards that are up there. And then when we came back down, we went to that Kaiwanda Community Center, and then our state senator Arnie was there, and Elizabeth, I forget her last name, Sumpton. She's our
the Parks Director.
Parks Director. They oversaw that segment of this whole event, and so it worked out, I think, really well. She, when she spoke, the first thing she did, and I thought this was really, I had a touch of class on her part. She says the first thing we really need to do is have a moment of silence to recognize the people that have died.
That's right, yeah.
And so that put a real special touch to this whole thing. And then there were a couple of different families that got up, where they lost their kids, and talked about what should or shouldn't be done. And it gave everybody a chance to sort of, vent's probably too hard, but this is something that's been bothering those people up there. You and I don't, I'll speak for myself. It's hard for me to personalize this because I'm not there.
Right.
And I read about it in a paper. Some kids from the valley aren't following directions, and they get killed.
Right.
And but the people that are there and watching the helicopters and the first responders that are pulling these dead kids out of the water, it gets to be a very, very personal situation.
Sure.
So we're going to have we're going to be setting up some sort of a task force to look at practical solutions. In fact, I'm going to try to get up there again today because I've got a guy, his name is Wes Kostick. He told me about some additional parking areas, and so that might even fit into the master plan that we're in the process of developing.
Oh, yeah.
So, but the problem is that this is a real special place for a couple of reasons. One is very beautiful, but number two, when you see that fence, when you go up there and you see that fence doesn't demonstrate to your mind's eye any danger. And so you look on the other side of the fence, and all you see is more sand dune and cape and trees and trails,
right,
and people. And so you think to yourself, "There's no danger here."
Right.
And so young kids and old kids want to cross that fence and go out there and look, and that's when they get themselves in trouble, because if you go somewhere else, there are other places where there's fences, and you look across the fence, and 2, 3, maybe 5 or 6 feet, there's an edge of a cliff.
Right.
Very clear what the danger is.
Yeah.
But this is different. People see these slopes, and they start walking on them, and then all of a sudden they start sliding because that sand gets really slick, and then they just drop off into the rocks below or the ocean, and they're in trouble.
Yeah.
Another big area that I forget the name of it, but it's the water comes washing into this.
Oh, the Punch Bowl.
Yeah, it's like this little canyon down there.
Yeah. And
it's a gradual slope getting down there, but the thing is, it's green and mossy, and it's very slick, and so you think, well, the upper end of that, I can walk down there, it's not a problem. But you get these waves that come in periodically. When the water comes in, it goes back out, and you go with it.
Yeah.
And you can't get out.
Right.
They do. People have been known to get out of there. There was one case where a guy did that. He got swept out, and 2 of his friends went to rescue him. Well, he swam around, and he was okay, and plus one of the other guys. But one of the guys that went to rescue him died.
Yeah.
Drowned. Just think how bad that guy feels.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Jeez. And so I don't, quite truthfully, I don't know what we can do. Kids at that age just think they're invincible. Mm-hmm. We all went through that.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and so you look at that and you think to yourself, how do we stop this? And so we're exploring some different ideas. Maybe put a memorial up there, the kids that have died.
Right.
I think there needs to be a better explanation of what the dangers are, instead of just saying you can't go beyond this fence.
Yeah.
There needs to be some sort of an explanation, because people are just going to continue to die, and they're all young kids.
Yeah, they are. I think I read somewhere that it was the ages ranged from 16 to 26, and with an average age of 19. So yeah, it's.
Yeah, I think since 2014 we've lost either 6 or 7.
Yeah,
and so,
which is a lot for one spot.
It really is, and so we've got to do something about that. But I think whatever we do, it's not going to be good enough.
Yeah, well, I remember somebody mentioning, the possible volunteers, going up to educate people. But there'll probably be a variety of things. Education. I don't know about public service announcements. That was one of the mothers of one of the people that died suggested that. But I don't know where the budget for that would come from. State parks might have it. I don't know.
What good would it do?
Yeah.
See, I just don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody had any really aha moments.
There was no big panacea type thing. Yeah.
So I don't know what we're gonna do. We can. I guess right now you can. There's no penalty for crossing the fence.
That was something I don't know if it's possible for that to be changed.
Well, I think so.
It seems like it.
Because I was just talking with Mark Labhart, Commissioner Labhart, this morning about that State Forestry has that. They will put up signs that. No motorized vehicles beyond this point, or
and you'll be fined if you do it. Yeah,
and you get fined, and so it's just a matter of developing an administrative rule and putting together a fine.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the things that we're going to be talking about.
That's good.
Up there.
All right. Well, we sure appreciate it, and keep us posted on what happens with that, and we will definitely talk to you in about another month then.
Well, and again, I apologize for being late, for trying to get out of it and not trying, but inadvertently.
No problem at all.
I think it turned out okay.
I think it turned out fine.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
Tomorrow, Lisa Greiner will return with Gary Albright from the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum on Tillamook Today.